Hello everyone. Tonight we're going to wander into the quiet corridors of your own thoughts and discover which ones were never really yours to begin with. Picture this, you're standing in a softly lit hallway. There's a door slightly ajar, warm light spilling out like melted butter across the tiles. You hear laughter, familiar, inviting, maybe even yours, but you don't remember telling a joke. You step inside to say goodbye, just for a second, and then somehow hours pass. You can either rethink everything or fall asleep without even noticing. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you really like what I'm doing here. Drop a comment with your thoughts, your location, and your local time. I'd love to see who's awake right now and why. Now, turn down the lights. Maybe crank up the AC for some soft noise, and let's get started tonight. You walk into the room. It's nothing special. Some couches, a couple half-full mugs on a coffee table, a stack of unread books pretending to be decorations. The vibe is casual. The kind of place where people make eye contact just long enough to seem interested, but not long enough to make it weird. You weren't supposed to stay. You know that? This was meant to be a pit stop. Say hi, grab your coat, invent a believable excuse about an early meeting tomorrow, classic social exit strategy. But here's the strange thing, the moment you said just 5 minutes, you gave up more than time. You surrendered control. The first tactic, temporal anchoring, it's the psychological equivalent of being handed an invisible leash. According to behavioral psychologist Daniel Kahneman, when someone offers a specific time frame or reference, you'll only be here 5 minutes. Right, your brain latches onto it like it's a contract. You don't question it. You structure everything around that number, even if the conversation spirals into quantum physics, tuna sandwiches, or a debate about which Spider-Man is emotionally healthiest. It's obviously miles. You're still tethered to the illusion that time hasn't moved. Scientists still argue about whether this type of anchoring is a subtle form of gaslighting or just a shortcut the brain uses to feel safe. But in this room, it starts to feel sinister. Because here's the weird fact in one experiment. Subjects in a waiting room were told someone will be with you in 10 minutes. 35 minutes later, none had complained. Their internal clock surrendered to someone else's script. Now back to you. You glance at your phone. The screen's dark, battery's dead. Or is it you press the button again? Nothing. Maybe it never turned on in the first place. The light in the room is soft, but somehow heavy. Like you're underwater. People keep speaking, not at you, but around you, threads of stories weaving into each other, looping, tangling, until you can't remember where one ends and the next begins. A woman near the bookshelf is describing a dream she had about a vending machine that dispenses secrets. It gave me one that wasn't mine, she says, laughing, but I kept it anyway. You chuckle and realize that's what just happened to you. You didn't mean to stay, but you accepted the emotional bribe of warmth, rhythm, and vague relevance. It's not just the space, it's the cadence of their voices, the soothing repetition. You know how casinos use red carpets to keep people stimulated and alert? This room does the opposite. It's all engineered softness, rounded syllables, pastel tones, and just enough echo to make your thoughts feel like they're bouncing back from somewhere else. Someone offers you tea, not just any tea chamomile with honey and lavender, the kind your grandmother swore could hypnotize bees. You take it because saying no feels aggressive, and aggression isn't allowed here. You sip, it's slightly too warm, but familiar, comfort disguised as compliance. You spot a clock on the wall. It ticks backward. You blink. It ticks forward. You blink again. It's gone. This place is bending time. and you're not sure how long it's been bending you. Let's define what just happened to you. Subtle entrapment. It's not the dramatic villain kind. No steel door slamming shut. It's the slow drip of agreement, where every small yes paves the way for the next. You've been nodding along to what doesn't matter. You're in now. And here's a funny story. In 2014, a marketing experiment in a mall played an ultrasonic tone in one zone that mimicked the hum of a cozy cafe. People stayed longer. In the control zone, nothing. They left faster. Just a sound. Just a feeling. Just suggestion. The couch beneath you now feels molded to your shape, but not in a good way. More like it has memorized you. Every small fidget, every polite laugh, every time you pretended to reach for your coat and didn't, the room knows, and it wants more. Someone starts telling a story about how frogs don't realize they're boiling if the heat rises slowly. You hate that metaphor. Everyone uses it. But then they add, unless the frog knows it's being watched. Then it jumps. You look around. No one's watching? Or are they? And now, here's the twist. You are the conversation. Your presence has been feeding it. Without realizing it, you've been offering micro reactions, facial cues, little nods and eyebrow flicks that guided the entire flow. You didn't leave, because they never let you think of leaving. Because every time your brain whispered exit, someone laughed, or offered tea, or said something just interesting enough. The room tilts, not literally, but in tone. Like gravity just changed direction. The laughter softens, the warmth stays, but now it feels like it wants something from you. Not your opinion, your attention, and it's getting it. Even now, even here, you think about standing. But the idea flickers and disappears, like the dead phone screen. And just as you're about to ask what time it is, someone leans forward and says, "Where were you going?" Again, and you don't know how to answer. Section 2. The voice is gentle, familiar, but unsettling in that way you can't quite name. It hits you like deja vu wrapped in velvet. You've heard that tone before. Not the words, just the way they're said. The rhythm, the pacing, the breath between syllables. "You okay?" the voice asks. You nod. Because that's the automatic response. Because no feels too dramatic. And maybe would require explaining things you haven't figured out yet. The second tactic slips in mirroring. It's subtle. The person across from you, maybe someone named Alex, or Jordan, or a name so neutral it doesn't even stick, is reflecting everything back at you. You cross your arms, they do too. You tilt your head. They mimic the motion half a second later. You say, "I guess," and they repeat, "Yeah, I guess." And suddenly it's hard to tell where your words end and theirs begin. Social media gurus still argue about whether mirroring is manipulation or connection. Psychologists say it activates something in the brain called the mirror neuron system, a network that helps us imitate facial expressions, gestures, even emotions. It's what babies use to learn. It's also what pickup artists and con artists use to gain trust. Fun. Right. You shift on the couch. The room hasn't changed, but it feels different. Like you've stepped into an echo chamber with skin. "I like your style," the voice says. And you almost say thank you, but stop. Because you're not wearing anything special. You're in that outfit you only wear on lazy days when laundry isn't a priority. No one compliments that. So you study their face instead. Nothing stands out. No flashy features. Just enough symmetry to be forgettable. "I like your style." They repeat, same inflection, same tilt of the head. And this is when you realize they're not complimenting you. They're syncing with you. Here's a weird fact in a 1999 experiment. Participants were paired with actors trained to subtly mimic their gestures. Those who were mirrored rated the interaction as warmer, more trustworthy, and more persuasive, even though they didn't consciously register the copying. Some even reported feeling seen. You try to break the loop, you scratch your left arm, deliberately, delayed, nothing. Then there it is. They do it too. Just a second later, pretending to adjust a sleeve. Coincidence? You blink slowly. They blink a little slower. The longer you sit here, the more they become you. But like a caricature, like someone watched your highlight reel and stitched together a puppet with all the edges smoothed out. I know what you mean. They say, you haven't said anything in minutes. You open your mouth to ask something, anything, but suddenly feel like the conversation already happened and you're just catching up. It's like being in a duet where both singers are using your voice. Let's define what's happening. Linguistic echoing. It's when someone repeats your words, cadence, even emotional tone back to you in a slightly shifted form. Therapists use it for rapport. Interrogators use it to disarm. Charismatic leaders use it to build loyalty. Your barista probably used it this morning. You can I get a decaf oat latte? Them totally one decaf oat latte. But now it's not charming. It's uncanny. Because you feel like you're being watched through a one-way mirror shaped like your own behavior. I was just thinking that. They say again, are you? There's a moment when your throat tightens, not from fear, just from an odd lack of orientation, like you're in a dream and can't find gravity. Because here's the trick when someone mirrors you just right. They don't just gain your trust, they replace your compass. You start to follow their rhythm like a song you didn't realize you knew by heart, and now the jokes creep in. Like the one about the psychology major who mirrored her professor so well, she accidentally earned an A in a class she never enrolled in. Or the story about a parrot that only repeated compliments and somehow convinced its owner to rewrite their entire dating profile. You're not laughing, though, because the voice across from you is now saying something about your favorite movie. But you never told them that. Not tonight. Not ever. You test it. You drop a reference to something obscure, an online meme you're sure no one else saw. Do you ever feel like that guy with the soup and the exploding microwave? They nod. Exactly. That's how I felt last Tuesday. You stare. The meme doesn't even have a Tuesday. It's just a looping GIF. And now, something clicks. They're not reading your mind. They're leading it. You've been nudged, word by word, tone by tone, to arrive at thoughts that aren't entirely your own. You think of a string, a long, invisible string tied from your chest to theirs, and every time they shift, the tension pulls you with them. And here's a callback. Remember the woman with the vending machine dream? The one who said she got a secret that wasn't hers. That's you. Now, this conversation, this loop is inserting ideas like post-its between your brain folds. You lean back, pretending to relax, but your mind's racing. You try to think of something purely yours, a childhood memory, a moment you never shared. The sound of your bike chain skipping on the old hill behind your house, the smell of warm Play-Doh, your third grade teacher's uneven handwriting. But even now, the voice cuts in softly. Your third grade teacher was a little strange, right? You jolt. They smile. Just a guess. Of course it is. Of course it is. Or maybe you blinked too long. Or maybe you nodded too early. Or maybe they knew what you were going to say all along. And now you're stuck again. Not by force, not by chains. Just rhythm. Just attention. Just someone who talks the way you do and makes it hard to look away. You smile politely, suddenly exhausted. You get me, they say, and that's the scariest part. Section 3, there's a moment small, forgettable, when someone brushes past your shoulder. Not roughly, not even intentionally, just contact. But it lingers. Not the touch itself, no, that was gone in less than a second, but the consequence. Because you nod, you don't know why, you just nod like you agree with something. Like an invisible question floated through the air, and your muscles decided to respond before you caught up. Welcome to Tactic 3, the touch that trains. You shift in your seat. The room still hums with the quiet rhythm of distant conversation, as if reality itself has been turned down to a soft background track. That same voice from before your mirrored companion has faded, though maybe not entirely gone. The space between people stretches and contracts like a lung, and then another tap, this time on your wrist. A person in a gray cardigan, not the mirroring one, leans in, smiling. You agree, right, they say, placing a soft hand over yours. Just briefly, and without meaning to, you nod again. There's something ancient happening here, something older than speech. Long before humans shared stories, they shared touch. And it turns out touch doesn't just comfort or alarm, it trains, it conditions. Let's define that operant conditioning, a term coined by B.E.F. Skinner. It's the idea that behaviors followed by positive reinforcement are more likely to be repeated. Most people imagine treats and whistles and lab rats, but in social settings, those treats are far more subtle. A light hand on the shoulder, a warm laugh, a nod that syncs with your own. You don't need a shock collar to be controlled. You just need a well-timed pat on the back and the illusion that you're being heard. Sociologists still argue about the ethical line between influence and manipulation, especially in high-stakes fields like politics, marketing, and whatever the Kardashians are doing today. But here in this strange, sleepy room, you're starting to suspect the whole architecture was built out of nudges. You shift again. Someone beside you laughs just a half second after you did. A beat later, their hand lands gently on your forearm. That's 3 touches in 5 minutes. You do the math in your head. If each touch carries a suggestion, and each suggestion leads to a reaction. How many of your decisions today were actually yours? Weird fact in one notorious 2010 study, diners whose servers made brief, friendly, physical contact left tips 23% higher on average. The touch wasn't remembered, but the feeling of goodwill was. And goodwill, it turns out, can be weaponized. Here, someone says, a cookie appears in your hand. You didn't see where it came from. You didn't ask for it. But there it is, still warm, dotted with suspiciously perfect chocolate chips. You take a bite, chew slowly. Your mouth moves before your brain objects. You smile before you understand the flavor. Delicious, right, the cookie giver says, touching your shoulder. Another nod, another yes. You feel like a puppet in a cozy play. Your strings replaced with polite social expectations and baked goods. You want to stand to break the loop. But someone asks your opinion first, and they touch your knee while they do it. You nod again. It's like your body has been trained, like Pavlov's dog, but instead of a bell, it's gentle fingertips and comforting voices. You keep agreeing, not because you believe, but because agreeing has been easier every time. Remember the couch from earlier, the one that molded to your shape? Yeah, you're not just molded, you're remolded. Now let's play a game. Try not to nod for the next 10 seconds. Go on. Freeze your expression. Don't move your head, even slightly. Ready. Too late. You probably just did. It's not your fault. You're wired to respond. In conversations, Micro expressions and gestures are part of the social glue that keeps things from breaking apart. If someone smiles, you mirror it. If they touch your elbow and say, right, your neurons spike with social electricity. You think it's connection, but it might be control. There's a term for this too, nonverbal suggestion. Stage hypnotists use it. So do cult recruiters, strangely friendly MLM reps, and that one uncle who always wins at Monopoly by talking too softly and tapping the table at just the right times. Another story. In a New York experiment, researchers sent out 2 sets of canvassers for a political campaign. One group used touch brief handshakes, shoulder taps. The other didn't. The touch group changed more minds. Not a huge swing, but enough to shift an election in a close race. No shouting, no debate, just hands. The room around you shifts again, not visibly, but socially. People lean in. Proximity decreases. You feel the warm gravity of shared space. Someone places a soft object in your hand. A stone. No, a stress ball, shaped like a brain. It helps. They whisper. You squeeze it. Not because you need to, but because it feels expected. And guess what happens next? They smile. They touch your shoulder. And you nod. The dangerous part about this, you still feel like yourself. You're not chanting. You're not wearing a uniform. You're just sipping tea, nibbling cookies, squeezing a brain-shaped stress ball, and saying, yeah, totally to things you didn't hear clearly. You've become pleasant. That's the word. Not passionate, not skeptical, not even curious. Pleasant. Agreeable. You glance at a mirror hanging crookedly on the wall. Your reflection looks relaxed, but you notice something off. Your posture is too straight, your head slightly tilted, the kind of look people use in toothpaste ads. You stare, and your reflection seems to nod. You want to test it, move without cue, shift unpredictably, but someone else says your name, and a light hand finds your back. I knew you'd understand. And maybe you do. Or maybe you just nodded again. Section 4. There's a laugh light. Easy. Just a ripple across the surface of the conversation, and for a moment, you feel proud. Not sure why. You don't remember saying anything funny, but someone is laughing, looking at you, with that specific upward tilt of admiration. Now, you're the one who fixed the whole thing. Right, they ask. You blink. Fixed what? But your mouth is already smiling, nodding, accepting, because apparently you're being congratulated for something you didn't do, and strangely, it feels good, which means you're about to start doing it. This is the tactic of false attribution. A compliment aimed precisely enough to bypass logic and go straight to the reward center of your brain. They're praising something vague. You don't know what thing was fixed, but their tone, the timing, the warmth of their eyes, your body interprets it as earned. And now you're chasing it like a golden retriever in a motivational seminar. You ever hear of the misattribution effect? Psychologists describe it as a trick of memory where the brain attaches the wrong label to the right feeling. You feel pride, assume it's justified, and then edit your own memories to match. Scientists still argue about how stable memory really is. Some think it's a biological archive. Others say it's more like Wikipedia with your emotions logged in as rogue editors, casually rewriting pages based on mood and social validation. And here comes the strange part. The more they praise you, the more your brain retroactively fills in the gaps. Yeah, maybe you did fix that spreadsheet last week, or say something profound about mirrors, or suggest that weird cookie flavor. And even if you didn't, doesn't it feel true? You remember a story, Probably a lie your cousin told in middle school about a man who got a standing ovation for a joke he never told. People laughed because others laughed, clapped because others clapped. By the end, he believed he told it too. That joke's still missing, but the applause etched in forever. You shift in your seat. Someone new sits next to you. You don't know them, but they greet you like your old friends. Can't believe you nailed that talk earlier. They whisper. What talk? Oh, they say, smiling. Modest too. You laugh, a little nervously. You weren't at any talk, but maybe you said something brilliant earlier, something you forgot, and they remembered. That's flattering, right? You feel yourself inflating slightly, not in a cartoonish way, just enough to sit straighter, smile wider, speak more confidently. And now you're telling a story about the time you organized a class debate. Did that really happen? It must have. You're describing it so clearly. Here's what's happening. You're rewriting your autobiography on the fly because the praise feels too good to dismiss, and now your identity is catching up to the version of you they've already accepted. Let's define it more precisely. The illusory truth effect. It's a phenomenon where repeated statements, even false ones, begin to feel true. Not because they're accurate, but because they're familiar. Politicians rely on it. So do advertisers. And apparently, so does the smiling person across from you with the unnervingly accurate sense of who you want to be. You ever get a fortune cookie that says you are admired by many and feel weirdly validated, even though it's a generic statement mass-produced in a warehouse in Ohio? Same energy. But this is more powerful because it's tied to your specific presence. You, sitting in this soft-lit room, being admired for a version of yourself that might only exist in someone else's story. Here's a weird fact. In 2005, a study had participants take a memory test, then showed them made-up scores proving they were above average. Later, when asked to reflect on their study habits, those participants remembered working harder than they really did just to match the praise. Praise alters memory, and memory builds identity, which means a compliment, well-timed, can literally rewrite who you are. You suddenly recall an old teacher, you can't remember her name, only that she once said, "You're the kind of student who notices what others miss." At the time, you didn't understand it. Now, it feels like a prophecy. You cling to it, retrofitting your personality around a sentence she probably said to half the class. Someone passes by and says, "They were just talking about you," with a wink. You nod. You smile. You say, "Oh, really?" Like it's normal. Like you're used to being the protagonist in rooms you didn't build. Because now, your brain is doing something dangerous. It's matching fiction to fact. You find yourself offering advice, calm, confident, the kind of advice you imagine an expert might say. And everyone listens. They nod. They say, "That's so true." You float in this strange, cozy balloon of affirmation. And inside that balloon is a voice yours that keeps repeating, "I've always been this way." Even if you weren't, you suddenly realize how cults work. Not the scary part, the robes and chanting, but the warm-up, the friendliness, the carefully placed compliments that make you forget who you were before someone told you who you could be. And here's the callback. Remember the story you overheard, the vending machine that dispensed secrets not meant for you. This is that, but reversed. You're being handed an identity you didn't earn. And you're accepting it because it's flattering, because it's easy, because it's nice. You glance toward the mirror again, half expecting your reflection to applaud. It doesn't, but the room does. A few claps, A few well-saids. Someone scribbles in a notebook like you just dropped ancient wisdom. You don't know what you said, but you nod anyway. Of course you do. You're the kind of person who always notices what others miss. Write section 5. It starts with a smile. Not yours, someone else's. One of those smiles that's just a little too timed, a little too symmetrical. Not a grin. Not flirtation. Just pleasant. Safe. The kind of smile that makes you feel like agreeing before you know what you're agreeing to. They gesture toward the door. Want to come help me with something real quick? You stand before you think. Nod before you process. Follow without knowing why. This is Tactic 5. The smile that made you obey. You tell yourself you're just being polite. That you're still in control. But there's a strange tilt to your steps, like they've already smoothed the floor beneath you, angled every surface toward yes. Psychologists call this social priming. It's when subtle cues like posture, tone, or expression preload your brain for a specific behavior. You're not told to agree, you just feel like you already have. You exit the lounge and enter a hallway you didn't know was part of the building. It's quieter here. Dimmer. Someone's humming a tune you can't quite place, like a lullaby you heard once in a fever dream. The smiling stranger, let's call him Theo, though he never says his name, leads you into a smaller room. Minimalist decor, one chair, one mirror, one table with a deck of cards, and 2 mugs of something warm. He gestures, you sit, and that's when you notice it. You're leaning toward him, not because you're curious, because he is smiling. Still, calm, reassuring. He says, you're good at this. You haven't done anything yet, but the compliment triggers something in your spine, a subtle straightening, a readiness to prove him right. He lays out the cards face down. Pick one. You do. He nods. That's what I would have picked too. And your chest fills with heat. Agreement, connection. You feel good. You feel understood. And you don't notice that you're not asking why the card matters, or what the game is. This is compliance through comfort. A weird fact. In a 2012 study, participants shown pictures of people smiling were more likely to change their opinions even when they consciously disagreed. Something about the smile bypasses logic. It hijacks the limbic system. Your brain thinks friendly face can harbor safe idea. Social psychologists still argue about whether this is manipulation or evolutionary shorthand. Some say it's a glitch in the tribal brain hardwired to follow those who offer warmth. Others argue it's a learned script if someone smiles. They must know what they're doing. Either way, it works. And it's working now. Theo tells you a short story about a cat that always meows at 2:17 and how every time he hears it, he feels like he's supposed to remember something but never does. You chuckle. That's not really funny, but you're smiling. And then he says, you know how that is, right? And you say, yeah, even though, no, you don't know that at all. That's the trick of the smile. It invites assumption. Because if someone's smiling, they must be telling the truth. They must be kind. They must deserve agreement. And your brain, desperate for ease, fills in the blanks. He starts stacking the cards, slowly, quietly, tapping each one like a metronome. And with each tap, he asks you something. Nothing deep, just preferences. Do you like rainy days? Do you prefer books over movies? Do you think people can change? You answer yes, or no, or whatever feels most in sync with the rhythm, and with every answer. He smiles, not big, just enough to make you feel like you got it right. You're not being quizzed, but you're still playing to win. You remember a story, something about how airline attendants are trained to smile before asking passengers to follow instructions? Studies showed compliance rose 14% when the smile came first. Not during, not after. First, the smile becomes a cue. The cue becomes obedience. And now, Theo is explaining something about memory. About how people's faces start to blur together when they've smiled at you too many times. You wonder if he's smiling now just to be forgotten later. You blink. You realize you haven't asked a single question. You haven't resisted. You haven't hesitated. You haven't even thought to say, "Why are we here?" or "What is this for?" Because every moment has been wrapped in reassurance. Your hands are on the table, palms down. Theo lightly places his hand on top of yours, and you let him. You don't even look at the door anymore, because it doesn't feel like you're trapped. It feels like you're trusted. And here's the dangerous callback. Remember when you stayed in the first room too long because of a smile? That same warmth, that same assurance. It's happening again. Just in a smaller room, with fewer people, less noise, but the same pattern. You've been taught that smiles are signals of sincerity, but sometimes they're scripts. Theo nods. You nod back. He hasn't said anything new, but it feels like he has. The air is thick with implied agreement. Like every beat of silence carries a shared understanding you didn't have to earn. Your heart beats once, you smile again, automatically. And when he finally says, "Let's go," you follow? No hesitation, no question, just the smile. Section 6. You don't notice the chair at first. It's just there, in the middle of the next room. Like furniture always is, neutral, padded, functional, beige, because of course it's beige. You walk past it without thinking until Theo stops. "Sit here," he says, with that same calm grin. You hesitate, then sit, and from the moment you lower yourself into it, something shifts. Not physically, the cushion is forgettable, the backrest fine, but psychologically, your opinions begin to dissolve at the edges. Welcome to Tactic 6, the chair that made you agree. You try to cross your arms but feel too exposed. You lean back, but suddenly feel passive. You shift forward, and now you're leaning in like someone waiting to be taught. None of it feels like a choice. It's like the chair decided for you. Here's the definition you didn't ask for but already feel: environmental framing. It's the subtle manipulation of behavior by altering spatial, sensory, or symbolic cues around you. In short, where you sit changes what you think. Architects know it, therapists use it, political strategists rely on it, social scientists still argue whether people have true opinions or just responses to furniture. The chair across from you is taller, just slightly. Theo sits in it, legs crossed, posture open, voice slow. He doesn't tell you anything. He just asks, and you answer. Not because you've been convinced, not because you care, because the room is arranged for surrender. The carpet absorbs resistance. The lighting smooths your convictions. The chair makes your thoughts sound too loud and your doubts feel rude. You tell yourself you're still you, that you're just sitting, that nothing about posture or proximity could possibly alter your worldview. But then Theo says something ridiculous, something like, "Most people secretly believe they don't exist," and you nod. You nod. You think back on your day. Did you always believe that? Did you just adopt it like a spare coat? Or has your mind been preloaded for agreement? Weird fact. In a Yale study from the 1970s, participants who sat in low, rounded chairs were more likely to accept risky proposals. Those seated on hard, upright chairs showed more resistance. Posture became policy. And now you're curled slightly to the left, arms resting where the chair wants them to rest, agreeing with sentences like, "Truth is just a story with better lighting." And disagreement is a glitch in emotional sync. You want to argue it, but the chair is too forgiving. It absorbs defiance, makes you feel sleepy, small, centered, like a compliant little compass needle swiveling toward comfort. Theo places something on your lap, a soft notebook, blank. He hands you a pen, not forcefully, just sets it there. Just write the 3 most important beliefs you hold, and you freeze because your mind is empty, or worse, influenced. Your old beliefs feel like dusty antiques you wouldn't bother unpacking. The only ideas with shape or weight are the ones Theo just whispered, or hinted, or smiled into existence. And even now, your hand starts to move. 1, people are mostly predictable. 2, my thoughts aren't always mine. 3, I feel safe when someone else decides. You stare at what you've written. It doesn't sound like you, but it feels like the chair. Let's break it down further. Status framing. Where you are in space literally affects what kind of role you take on. Sit below someone, you feel deferential. Sit across, adversarial. Sit beside, collaborative. Sit surrounded by softness, and suddenly resistance feels like yelling in a pillow. Fort. And the room around you is a masterclass in softness. The walls curve slightly inward, no sharp corners, no loud colors. A faint scent of cedar and linen. It's like being inside the world's most polite thought experiment. Theo stands now. He moves behind you, quiet, non-threatening, and gently adjusts your chair angle. You don't flinch, you just reposition. "You're doing really well," he says. You smile, because the chair makes praise feel like gravity. You remember a story, probably from some random podcast, about a corporate trainer who restructured boardroom tables into circles instead of rectangles. In 2 months, dissent dropped 40%. Not because people agreed more, but because no one wanted to be the sharp angle in a round room. You glance toward the mirror again. Yep, it's still there. Watching, absorbing, maybe even blinking. Your reflection looks pliable, comfortable, slightly more agreeable than you remember. Here's the callback. Remember how that first couch molded to your shape? This chair does the same, but backwards. It molds you to its shape, and its shape says, give in. And the worst part? It feels nice. You've been resisting all your life, arguing, debating, asserting opinions just to hear them bounce off the wall. But here now you don't have to do that. You can just relax into belief. Let the room decide what's true. Theo places a hand on the back of the chair. Not on you, just the chair. But the gesture still feels like approval. You've changed, he says. And maybe he's right, because the chair made it feel okay. Section 7. The story starts with a bus, or maybe a train. You don't remember the details, only that it was public transportation, and it was raining. Theo begins telling it as if it's just a funny thing that happened on his commute. Something about a lost phone, a stranger with headphones, a moment of shared confusion. But halfway through the story, you pause because the details start to feel uncomfortably familiar. The rain, the overheard song, the offhand comment about your hometown. That's your hometown? You lean forward. Wait, when did this happen? Theo smiles, shrugs. It's just a story, but it's not. This is Tactic 7. The story you didn't realize was about you. You don't remember telling him about that day, if it was even a day. Maybe you posted something online, a photo of wet shoes, a caption about being stuck next to someone chewing loudly. Did he see that? Is this some hyper-specific coincidence? Or is this targeted familiarity a trick of memory engineered to wrap around you? Like a blanket you don't remember buying. Let's define what just happened. Narrative parasitism. That's when someone tells a story so aligned with your personal experiences that your brain adopts it as autobiographical truth. A term used more in literary psychology than in everyday conversation, but the effect is chillingly real. Sociologists still argue about the boundaries between shared experience and emotional mimicry, especially in parasocial relationships. Like when a podcast host feels like your friend because they talk about things you relate to, you bond. Not because of shared experience, but because they borrowed yours. And now, Theo's story is crawling through your own timeline, grafting itself onto your memories. He mentions a nickname, one only your college roommate used. He talks about a dream that matches a note you wrote once in the margins of a diary you threw out years ago. You feel seen, and then you feel surveyed. Your chest tightens. How do you know all this? Theo raises his eyebrows, like he's surprised by the question. I don't, he says, you just seem familiar. Here's a weird fact. In 2016, researchers demonstrated that with just 30 minutes of access to someone's public social media, they could accurately guess intimate preferences, music, politics, even attachment styles using nothing but pattern analysis. No AI, just humans. Mimicking intimacy, that's what's happening here. Intimacy isn't earned, it's simulated. Theo keeps going. His voice is soft, unthreatening, like a podcast you fall asleep to but somehow remember perfectly. He talks about a decision he once made to leave a party early because he didn't like the vibe. You feel that in your spine. You've done that, exactly that. But here's the twist. He then describes the art on the wall from that night blue sunflowers. You saw blue sunflowers once, years ago. Not in your feed, not in public, in a dream. You don't remember telling anyone about it. You feel the room breathe, or maybe it's you. The line between coincidence and surveillance collapses. And you finally say it out loud. Are you telling me my own story? Theo just smiles. Not the comforting one now. A little crooked, knowing. It's a good story, he says. You feel yourself splinter, because part of you is terrified, and part of you is flattered, and the rest of you is just tired. It's easier to believe you're just imagining it, that your memories are being nudged, not stolen. Here's the psychological kicker, memory reconsolidation. Every time you recall a memory, you rewrite it, the neurons fire, the image reconstructs, and you resave it slightly edited. Over time, that story about you changes. Like a photocopy of a photocopy. So if Theo repeats your own story back to you with a few upgrades, better lighting, smoother dialogue, more flattering reactions, your brain might keep his version instead. You test yourself. Try to remember the original moment. You only remember this one. You lean back in the chair that molded your agreement, in the room that mirrors your psychology, listening to a stranger narrate a life that sounds better than yours and more accurate? You want to interrupt? But he's already on to the next scene, describing your old bedroom, the one with the glow-in-the-dark stars, the window with the cracked frame. You don't say anything, because now you're not sure whether that memory was yours or his. Remember the vending machine metaphor? The one from section 1, the secret that wasn't your but you kept it anyway. Now the vending machine is reverse engineering you, feeding your own memories back to you with better grammar and stronger emotional arcs. And the wildest part? It's working. You smile when he mentions the library with the red beanbags. That's where you first kissed someone. Or did Theo just say that? You shake your head, gently, but the memory doesn't shake loose. It settles in deeper, and now you're thinking, what else do I remember that someone else just told me? Because here's the thing about stories once told. Well, they become truer than truth. They sink in past doubt. They sculpt your internal narrator. And Theo, he's very, very good at telling your story. Section 8, you're mid-sentence talking about something forgettable. Maybe soup, maybe dreams about soup when Theo glances sideways. Just a flick of the eyes, barely a twitch, and like a marionette on muscle memory. You change your next word. You don't even catch it right away. It's only afterward, when you trace the rhythm of your sentence, that you realize it bent where his eyes pointed. A glance, a blink, a subtle head tilt, and you steered your own thought off its original track. Welcome to Tactic 8, the glance that chose your next word. This is nonverbal conversational control, and you've just been played like a soft instrument in a humid jazz club. The melody yours. The tempo, that was him. Let's define this phenomenon, micro-behavioral influence. It's a term psychologists use to describe the way small, unconscious social cues, eye movements, posture changes, breath shifts, guide our decisions without us realizing it. Philosophers still argue whether we possess free will or just excellent reaction time. And right now, you're leaning toward the second option. Theo sips from his mug. It's probably tea, or maybe confidence concentrate. You can't tell anymore. He asks, have you ever said something and realized it wasn't what you meant, but it still felt right? You laugh, not because it's funny, but because it's true. And also because you're not sure if you said it first. Because the last few sentences, they sounded like him. The cadence, the phrasing, the choice of words like resonate and admittedly and nuanced. Words you only use when you're trying to sound like someone who understands panel discussions. It's not mimicry, it's osmosis, conversational contagion. Weird fact. In a 2018 study on group dialogue, researchers found that dominant speakers could influence not just tone, but word choice, sentence structure, even metaphor patterns within 3 minutes. The participants didn't notice, but the audio analysis caught it. Theo leans forward. You're really articulate, he says. You nod? Because you are... Aren't you, except lately? Your thoughts arrive with a weird echo, like they were rehearsed before you got here, pre-written in someone else's margin notes. He nods again, but slower this time, then looks just past your shoulder, just barely, and once again, you change your answer mid-thought. You stop, restart. I think I prefer the idea of you don't finish that sentence either, because you're not sure if that's what you were going to say or just what you felt you should. This is how social steering works. Not through force, not through argument, but through suggestive gravity. Your mouth drifts toward approval like a compass needle twitching toward magnetic calm. Theo doesn't interrupt. He doesn't argue. He directs with gestures so small that they might be accidental, might be... You remember a story somewhere in a TED Talk rabbit hole about a courtroom study. Jurors were more likely to favor testimony from a witness who maintained direct eye contact for less than 3 seconds, then looked away more than 3 seconds. It felt creepy. Less than one dishonest, but the just right glance turned testimony into truth. You glance at Theo. He's in perfect Goldilocks mode. You speak, and he subtly rewards you, eyes lighting up, body turning towards you slightly. It's like a live feedback loop. And here's the kicker, your brain loves being agreed with, even more than it loves being correct. You say something about memory. Theo blinks. You change it to a comment about emotion and memory. He nods slightly. So you go further. You mention the hippocampus. That feels smart. He smiles. So you push again, dragging out a theory you half remember about episodic encoding and how childhood memories are unreliable but emotionally sticky. You don't even know if you believe that, but it feels good to say, because he's feeding you back to yourself, one microscopic cue at a time. You want to rebel, say something totally off script. Something bizarre. Like, did you know lobsters taste with their legs, but your tongue freezes? Your body knows that doesn't match the mood. Doesn't align with the room's emotional tempo? And the worst part, you're not being silenced. You're being synchronized. You shift in your chair. He mirrors the motion by shifting his glass. You clear your throat. He blinks. And now you're wondering how many of your original thoughts were just pre-approved rhythms from someone else's gaze. Let's throw in a callback. Remember section 2, the mirroring voice that reflected your tone until you couldn't tell whose thought was whose. This is the next level. It's not just mirroring anymore, it's preloading. You are now a suggestion engine. You auto-complete your own thoughts based on how he looks at you. Theo smiles. You're really good at reading people. And that's the final twist, isn't it? Because now you think you're doing it? You think you have the power? But you don't. You've just been trained to think so. You start to speak again. But this time, you hesitate. You glance away, hoping to find your voice in the corner of the room. But there's nothing there. Only a mirror. And in it, you see yourself waiting to be prompted. Section 9. Silence. Not absence of sound silence, but the kind that wraps around your shoulders and leans in too close. The kind that isn't empty at all, but pressurized. The kind that makes your ears ring with the sound of your own heartbeat, even though the room is full of people not speaking. Theo doesn't say anything. He just stares at you. Kindly, softly, and you start talking. Not because you want to, because you can't stand the quiet. This is Tactic 9. The silence that made you confess. You tell yourself you're still in control, that you're just filling the space, making casual conversation, but your mouth has gone rogue. It's skipping the part of your brain that filters, that edits, that decides what's safe. You're saying things you didn't plan to say. You know, I used to lie about liking jazz. Why did that come out? I once stole a book from a friend because they never finished it and I wanted it more. Where is this coming from? Theo nods gently, still silent. The room is silent too, but not asleep. It's listening, not actively, not with ears, with expectation. There's a strange psychological term for this conversational vacuum. It's the uncomfortable void left when someone stops talking at the exact moment you expect them to respond and instead just watches. Humans are wired to avoid that vacuum, so we fill it with anything, even truth. Sociologists still argue whether silence is more powerful than speech and interpersonal control. One camp says language is our primary tool for shaping behavior. The other says it's the gap between words that controls us the most. You're starting to side with the second because right now, your brain is flipping through your mental Rolodex for anything at all that will pop the pressure balloon. You remember a study from a negotiation training course you once half-watched when one party stays silent after a proposal. The other party often offers more unprompted just to break the tension. Theo is offering you nothing, and so you keep giving. My first pet wasn't actually mine. It was the neighbor's. I just kept feeding it. You stop, you chuckle. Why did you say that? What was the point? Theo finally speaks. That makes sense. That's it. That's all he says. But now your stomach flips, because that sentence feels like a verdict, a quiet gavel. No judgment, just understanding, which makes you want to explain even more. You lean forward. It's not like I'm proud of it. He says nothing again. The silence returns. You try to hold it. You fail. There was this time in the high school I fake cried to get out of a presentation. I told them I had a panic attack. I just didn't read the book. Theo lifts his eyebrows slightly. Not enough to interrupt. Just enough to tell you he heard it. You want to laugh. Instead, you keep talking. Because now it's not about the silence. It's about the feeling of being witnessed. And once you feel witnessed, you start to unwrap. Here's a weird fact in therapy settings. Patients often reveal deeper truths after long silences, not during insightful questioning. Silence is the crucible. It burns off the polite fluff. What's left is what you actually believe. But Theo isn't a therapist, and this isn't therapy. This is something else. A game with no rules but one. The less he says, the more you reveal. You start recalling things with bizarre clarity. The way your third grade teacher looked at you when you lied about your reading log, the exact texture of the couch cushion you sat on while pretending not to hear your parents arguing. The first time you thought, maybe I'm not the good guy in this story. You say these things out loud. Theo remains still. Not cold, not detached, just receptive. And in that stillness, you find yourself craving approval, even just a nod, a blink. Something to tell you that unloading your psychological glove box isn't a mistake. But here's the danger. You're creating your own confession booth. He didn't ask. You volunteered. Remember back in section 1, the room you forgot to leave because it felt warm, familiar, slow. This is the inverse. No warmth. Just pressure. Not loud. Just silent. And you realize something terrifying. You've been conditioned to fill in every blank. The blank in the sentence. The blank in the gaze. The blank in the air between two chairs. Theo closes his eyes for a moment, as if to say, I already know the rest, but go on anyway. You do. I have dreams where I'm someone else. But the weird part is, I don't miss myself. You hear yourself say that and feel like it came from a different mouth. A smaller one, a truer one. You don't even know what that sentence means, but it feels right, like something that needed air. Theo opens his eyes. You're doing great. And now, after spilling your most unfiltered thoughts, that single sentence floods you with more validation than you expected. You exhale. You feel lighter. You feel played. Because you know this was a tactic, and you still fell in. Because silence isn't just an absence, it's a mirror. And tonight, you've been talking to yourself. Section 10. You hear laughter before you open the door. Not individual laughs, but the kind of collective amusement that sounds like it came from a single mind stretched across many mouths. Warm, rhythmic, slightly too synchronized. The moment you step inside, all heads turn toward you and they smile together, and without thinking, you smile back. This is Tactic 10, the group that thought for you. They make space for you on a long, cushioned bench. A spot opens like it had been waiting for your arrival. No one gestures. No one needs to. It's a kind of social choreography you didn't rehearse, but somehow already know the steps to. You sit, and then something strange happens. You agree with something before it's even said. Someone, maybe the girl in the maroon hoodie, maybe the tall guy with the quiet eyes, says, "It's funny how people think they have original opinions." Everyone laughs. So do you. You didn't even process the statement. You just laughed. Welcome to the machinery of group conformity. Here's the definition your brain might already be absorbing. Normative social influence It's the pressure to align with a group in order to gain acceptance or avoid rejection. You don't necessarily believe what they believe, but you want to belong. And your nervous system would rather be wrong with friends than right and alone. Social scientists still argue whether groupthink is a natural survival strategy or a cultural virus. The current consensus, yes. You glance around. Everyone's posture matches, soft angles, legs crossed or folded under, shoulders curved inward, not out. Even their voices share a tempo, a kind of conversational hum that reminds you of shared prayers or cult documentaries you once half-watched and then quickly closed. They pass you a cup, not tea this time, something else. It tastes like honey and ozone. You nod? Good. You say, you don't know what it is. But they smile, so you say it again. Really good. You can feel it happening. The soft rewiring, the gradual melting of individuality into group identity. You try to think a different thought, anything counter to the room. But the moment it forms, someone near you says, you ever notice how when someone's resisting, it's usually just fear dressed up like logic? More nods, more smiles. You forget what your thought was. Weird fact. In a 1951 experiment by Solomon Asch, participants were asked to match line lengths. The task was simple until the actors in the room, planted by the researcher, began answering incorrectly. Over 75% of subjects conformed at least once, knowingly giving the wrong answer just to match the group. And here you are, sitting with your own Asch line test, but instead of line lengths, it's beliefs, ideas, values, all just slightly edited to match the emotional tone of the group. Someone starts a sentence with, "We all know that." And whatever follows, no matter how abstract, flawed, or hollow, feels like truth. Not because it's true, because everyone else nods when they hear it. You glance at the mirror, it's still there. It always is. Your reflection seems faded, like a carbon copy. Your expression doesn't belong to you anymore. It belongs to the room. This is identity contagion. Not just echoing someone's words, echoing their sense of self. You speak up quietly, just enough to hear yourself. I'm not sure I agree. And instantly, you regret it. Not because anyone reacts negatively, quite the opposite. They all turn, soften their eyes, tilt their heads in that way that feels more dangerous than anger, like they're disappointed in advance, like they expected this moment. Someone near you says, "That's okay. You will," not threatening, just certain. And now you're wondering if they all went through this too. If every one of these calmly nodding people had a moment of resistance and then gave in. There's a pause in the conversation. Just a breath. And you jump into it. I just think, but someone finishes your sentence. Gently, accurately. Almost better than you could have said it yourself. You nod. You don't know why. Let's call back to section 8. The glance that chose your next word. That was one person directing your narrative. This is a crowd. A living organism made of agreement. And you're part of it now. Not because they convinced you, because they absorbed you. There's something seductively easy about it. No decisions, no friction, just a soft fall into collective rhythm. Like a river that sings in consensus. And for a moment, it's comforting. You realize you haven't looked at your phone in hours, maybe longer. You don't remember what it felt like to be separate. You only remember what it feels like to be in tune. The person next to you squeezes your hand. We're glad you're here. And maybe they mean it, or maybe that's just the line they use for every new thought that loses its edges. Either way, you nod, and the group nods back. Section 11. It begins with a question. Simple, harmless. asked, like someone offering you a cookie they've already half-eaten, casual, unthreatening. A little too sweet. Hey, when was the first time you doubted what was real? You blink? You weren't expecting anything deep. You were halfway through a sip of that sweet ozone drink. But now, your mind stutters. You try to answer honestly. I think it was Theo interrupts softly. No, not think. Remember? This is Tactic 11. The question that made you doubt reality. The room is quiet again. Not heavy like last time. Light, expectant, a thin silence, almost playful. You try to rewind your brain. Something about second grade, a broken window? No? Earlier. Or maybe later? You're not sure. That time you thought your friend moved away, but he never did. Theo says. Your breath catches. You never told anyone that. You feel heat rising in your neck. You want to correct him? But instead, you ask, wait, did I imagine that he just tilts his head? Like a librarian who knows you're overdue. This is where it begins, the mental unravel. Not a collapse. Not a break. A soft undoing. Like someone slowly pulling threads from a sweater you forgot was handmade. Let's define what you're experiencing source confusion. It's a memory glitch where you remember the content of something, but not where or how you learned it. Did you see it in a dream? A documentary? Did it happen to you? Or was it just someone else's story that burrowed in? Neuroscientists still argue whether memory is stored like a file or recreated like a painting each time you access it. Spoiler, it's the second one. You remember the friend, Michael, Mitch, no, Mason? You remember he moved. But then another memory surfaces. A school play. Years later, he was there. So, which version is true? You look up. The group is watching you again. Not judging. Just waiting. Patient. Almost reverent. Like you're the guest of honor at a dinner where the main course is your own uncertainty. Theo asks another question. What color was the wall of your childhood bedroom? Easy. Right, you say? Blue. He nods. With yellow stars, you flinch. Because, yes. But also, weren't they glow in the dark? You say, actually, I think they glowed. Theo raises one eyebrow. Did they? Or do you just remember them that way now? And just like that blue isn't blue anymore, memory is a slideshow, and someone just took the clicker out of your hand. Here's a weird fact. In a 1995 experiment, researchers were able to implant false memories in participants by describing events that never happened, like getting lost in a mall as a child. Over time, 25% of participants not only accepted the memory as real, but added details that weren't suggested. You're starting to feel that now. Someone on your left says, "Isn't it wild how we rewrite ourselves every time we remember?" You don't know her name. You don't remember when she sat down, but she's not wrong. And now, the questions start coming faster. Do you remember your first kiss? Or just the story you've told about it? Have you ever felt homesick for a version of yourself that might not have existed? Was your favorite song actually your favorite? Or did you just like the person who showed it to you? Each one lands like a soft hammer. Quiet, but reshaping something inside your skull. You try to hold on to something solid. Your name, your birthday, that time you fell off your bike and chipped a tooth. But even that last one wasn't the tooth on the right side. You always thought it was left. You glance toward the mirror. It shows you what you expect, but just barely. For a split second, your reflection smiles before you do. And you think, was that real, or did someone suggest it? The group starts telling a story. Not at you, around you. A shared memory. A campfire tale with no clear beginning. One person says, "You were there. Remember? Another adds, "You told us the part about the deer in the hallway." You laugh. "I didn't say that." They nod. "You did. It was your line. And now you're not sure because you can see it. The hallway, the deer, the nightlight flickering. It feels real. It plays like a movie trailer with just enough lighting to seem high budget. But was it yours? Or did they just put the thought in your head? 5 seconds ago? Memory isn't a library. It's a campfire, and anyone near the flame can add logs." Theo smiles. "See, you're remembering better already." And you nod. Because it's easier than arguing with ghosts. Because maybe they're right. Maybe you were there. Maybe you told that story. Maybe you've always been here. You glance down at your hands, and you can't remember whether you've been holding that teacup this whole time. Section 12. You hear the story again, but this time, it's not coming from you. Someone across the room, maybe the maroon hoodie girl, maybe Theo, maybe someone whose face is already starting to blur, starts retelling a moment you remember clearly. The first concert you went to, the one where the lights turned gold during your favorite song. And you swore it was the closest thing to divine intervention you'd ever felt. Only now, they say it was blue and raining. And that you cried during the second song, not the fifth. And the worst part, everyone nods. This is Tactic 12. The frame that changed the facts. You open your mouth to correct them, but hesitate. Because what if they're right? What if you're just misremembering? What if the lights were blue and you've been carrying a golden lie for years, warming your hands by a memory that never happened? Let's define the shift you're experiencing. Memory reframing. It's the process of altering a person's perception of a memory by changing the context or emphasis, sometimes subtly, sometimes surgically. And once the new frame is introduced, it becomes harder and harder to access the original version. Psychologists still argue whether memory is a stable structure or an open source document constantly rewritten by whatever editor wanders in with a pen and a point of view. You say, "I remember it differently." The girl smiles. "That's okay, it probably just feels different now." That sentence hits like a warm breeze over a trapdoor. Because yes, things do feel different now, but is that because of time, or because someone handed you a new lens and told you to look again? You stare at your hands. Are they shaking? Maybe a little, not with fear, just uncertainty. The kind that creeps in when you're not sure which version of your life is the official one anymore. Theo pulls out a small object from his pocket. A snow globe. Inside it, a miniature room, a chair, a figure that looks vaguely like you, bent over, thinking. He shakes it. The flakes swirl. "Memories are snow globes," he says. "Shake them up." And the whole landscape changes, even if the house stays the same. You want to laugh at how cliche it sounds, but then again, it feels true. Here's a weird fact in courtroom experiments. When eyewitnesses were asked leading questions about what they saw, their memories shifted to match the suggestion, even when they were shown video evidence afterward. Their minds bent the footage to match the narrative. That's what's happening now. Not gaslighting. Something more artful. The memory remains, but the frame around it has changed. And so it feels different. It belongs to someone else. Or to everyone. You try again. "I remember the lights were gold." The person next to you tilts their head. "Are you sure it wasn't just your imagination?" And you hesitate. Because you've heard that voice before, not their voice. That voice, the one people use when they're not trying to win an argument. They're trying to plant a seed, and your mind is suddenly fertile soil. You try to hold on to the old memory, that golden flash, that impossible moment, but the group is talking again. And now they remember the concert. They remember you crying, They remember holding your hand. They remember you saying something you don't remember saying. Did I say that? They nod. Was I wearing a red jacket? More nods. You were so sure it was black. But red is vivid. It makes for a better story. And just like that, the better version wins. Let's pause and acknowledge what you're feeling cognitive reshaping. It's not that your memories are being deleted. They're being repackaged, upgraded, marketed back to you like a streaming service reboot. You once had a shaky cam memory. Now it's a 4K Netflix original with surround sound and character arcs. Theo leans in. It's okay. Stories evolve. You whisper. But if they evolve too far, am I still the same person? He shrugs. Are you ever... And now the room fades slightly, and just enough for your memory to stop clinging. For your mind to start accepting. They pass around photos, not yours. Just blurry Polaroids of people that look almost like people you know in places you almost recognize. Every photo has a caption, a date, a label, and someone whispers, "You're in this one." You look, you squint, it could be you, or maybe it's just framed like it is. And you realize it doesn't matter whether the photo is real. It matters that everyone agrees it's you. That's the frame now, the new truth, and inside it, you look happy. Section 13. You're pacing now, not running, not frantic, just walking in a soft, repetitive loop, 10 steps forward, slow turn, 10 steps back. There's no destination. The floor is quiet. The air is still. You're not trying to get anywhere. You're trying to think, but something strange is happening. Every few steps, a phrase plays in your head, 3 words, same cadence, same tone. You don't know where it came from, you didn't invent it, and you just keep repeating it. And the more it loops, the more it starts to feel true. This is Tactic 13, the loop that broke your will. At first, you think it's harmless, just a thought, a leftover soundbite from a conversation, or maybe a lyric. Your brain hums these things all the time, but this one's different. It's not music, it's language, and it's sticky. It sounds like maybe they're right, or I was always like this, or this feels real. Whatever the phrase, it's not yours. Not entirely. It doesn't carry your handwriting. It feels inserted, slid between your neurons while you weren't paying attention. Let's name it semantic saturation. It's a psychological state where repeated phrases lose their meaning and become rhythmic triggers disconnected from logic, but still capable of guiding thought. It's what advertisers use when they want you to remember a jingle. It's what interrogators rely on when they want you to believe something through sheer mental erosion. Philosophers still argue whether repetition clarifies meaning or replaces it. You're leaning toward the second one now, especially as the loop in your head gains volume. You try to override it, replace it with something of your own. You repeat your name, your birthday, your favorite movie, your mother's voice, but the loop cuts through like static. This feels real. This feels real. This feels real. You pause mid-step. You mutter, "What does that even mean?" No one answers. Because you're alone in this hallway now. The others are behind a closed door, still murmuring agreement in unison. You glance down the hallway. All the doors look the same. You don't remember which one you came from. You're not sure if you're heading forward or just circling. You check your watch. It's blank. You check your hands. They feel unfamiliar. You try to remember what you were just doing 5 minutes ago. Nothing comes. Just the loop. And here's a weird fact during prolonged isolation studies. Subjects reported hearing phrases they never consciously learned. Repetitive thoughts with no obvious origin. Psychologists speculate it's the mind's way of stabilizing itself, anchoring to anything that feels coherent, even if it isn't true. You say the loop out loud just to make it tangible. This feels real. It still does. But now you wonder, why do I need to be reminded of that? You flash back section 9, the silence that made you confess. You remember offering truths just to fill the vacuum. Now, there's no silence. Just this sentence, over and over, flattening your mind like a river carving a canyon into soft stone. You try to resist. You try to say something contradictory. This is manipulation. But it doesn't stick. The loop answers. This feels real. You whisper they planted this thought. Loop, this feels real. You shout, I know who I am. The loop pauses. Then answers, do you? And now you don't know whose voice that was. Not your own. Not Theo's. Maybe no one's. Maybe it's just the voice of compliance, dressed in your diction. Here's what's terrifying. Repetition doesn't just break resistance, it rewrites rhythm. You've stopped thinking in sentences. You're thinking in loops. You pass a mirror. There's always a mirror, and see yourself walking in time with the thought. Your steps align with it. Your breath matches it. You are a metronome in someone else's music. And that phrase, it could have been anything. Some people get political slogans. Others get childhood mantras. You got 3 soft words designed to feel like home. You touch the wall. Cool, smooth, unyielding. You whisper a different phrase, something absurd, something real. I am a spatula in a velvet trench coat. You say it twice. It helps. A little. The loop stutters, not much, but enough to remind you there's still space for interruption. This is your last trick. Disrupt the loop. Not because it's false, but because it's not yours. You sit on the floor. Close your eyes. Listen. The loop returns one more time. This feels real. You respond. Then why do I feel like I'm dreaming? The hallway goes quiet. And for the first time in a while, there's no reply. Section 14. You wake up, or at least, you think you do. You're in the same chair, in the same softly lit room, in the same looping mood where nothing sharp can land. Theo is gone. The others are silent. The mirrors are still, but something's changed. There's a card on the table. Just a plain white card, one word in bold, player, and now you know. This is Tactic 14, the game you didn't know you were playing. The walls feel too straight, the light too even. You realize this hasn't been a conversation, or a journey, or even a guided experience. It's been a test. You were the experiment, the maze rat, the variable, the control. And the weirdest part, you've been performing beautifully. Let's define the construct you're now trapped in. Unwitting participation. It's when an individual is enrolled into a behavioral or psychological process without consent but with just enough comfort to avoid detection. Think of it as a magic trick, but the wand is neuroscience and the rabbit is your autonomy. Scientists, philosophers, game theorists, they still argue whether life is simulation, strategy, or spectator sport. But here, in this soft, padded reality, it feels like all 3. You pick up the card, flip it. On the back, round 3. Obedience, resistance. You don't remember round 1 or 2, but the moment you read it, everything clicks. The T, the silence, the mirroring, the loop, the reframed memory. All of it wasn't just control. It was measurement. Every nod, every hesitation, every confession you've been scored. You look up, there's a camera now. Tiny. Red light, blinking like a heartbeat. How long has it been there? You whisper. What happens if I lose no answer? Just the faint hum of artificial ventilation and the distant echo of agreement in another room. You think about walking out, standing up, breaking a lamp just to do something unscripted. But then you hear a chime and a voice. Theo's. But not live filtered. Automated. Professional. Thank you for participating. Your data is invaluable. Your stomach drops. You try to rewind. Where did you sign up for this? Was there a form, a waiver, a choice? But that's the thing with these games. Consent isn't always required when comfort is offered. Here's a weird fact. In a controversial study in the early 2000s, researchers found that over 70% of people would comply with increasingly absurd instructions in a staged team-building exercise, simply because they believed everyone else had agreed first. You glance back at the group in the next room. Still nodding, still synced, still smiling. Were they even real, or were they part of the test, NPCs in the game you didn't realize you queued for? You flip the card again. The word player shifts slightly under the light. Or maybe you read it wrong the first time. Maybe it said pawn. Your thoughts blur. You try to remember how you got here, not metaphorically, logistically. What building is this wet street? What time is it? What day? Your brain shrugs. The loop returns not the same words, but the same structure. An invisible rhythm beneath your thoughts. Like you're on rail, you scratch your arm, a tattoo. No, just a faint impression. Letters. You press into the skin. Read what's etched in pink. Always say yes. Your breath catches. A phrase that shouldn't be there. Not a memory, a command. Something planted during the smile, during the story, during the mirror. This whole thing, it wasn't just manipulation. It was training. And you passed or failed. Hard to say. Theo's voice returns softer now. Less robotic. Almost kind. If you're hearing this, you made it to the last room. You look around. Is this the last room? Not everyone gets this far. The voice continues. Most stop at the first mirror, or the second loop, but you kept going. That means you're ready. Ready for what you whisper the question. And the door opens, not dramatically. No gust of air, just a quiet creak, like the room is breathing out. Beyond it, another room, same lighting, same arrangement, but empty, except for one chair and a card. This time, it says controller. You don't move, because now you realize the final stage of control is the illusion that you're the one giving orders. And the second you sit in that chair, the second you accept that title, you become the new Theo. You feel the loop coming again. This time it says you made the choice. You made the choice. You made the choice, and maybe you did. Or maybe you were always meant to. Section 15. The door doesn't close behind you. That might be the most unsettling part. You walk into the final room slowly, waiting for the soft, mechanical click of inevitability, for the ritual of containment to restart, but it never comes. The door remains open, just a dark rectangle in the wall, inviting you to turn back. But you don't. Because something about being here feels inevitable. Like returning to the beginning of a loop, not breaking out of it. The chair waits in the center. It's nothing special, pale wood, unpadded, carved with a curve that fits a person shaped like you. The card on the seat still reads, controller. You want to scoff. You want to say something witty like, finally promotion. But the words don't come. Instead, your hand moves on its own and picks up the card. The moment your fingers touch it, you feel warm, not cozy warm. Electrified warm, like your blood knows this symbol. Like your nervous system just remembered an ancient job title. This is Tactic 15, the mirror that blinks first. You sit, not out of obedience, out of curiosity. That's how it gets you in the end, not by force, not by fear, but by answering a question you didn't know you'd been asking this whole time. What would I do if I were in charge? A screen lowers from the ceiling. Or maybe the wall. You're not sure. It appears like a whisper, matte, black, unblinking, and on the screen not a recording, not a reflection. You, now. Lev, feed. Watching yourself, watch yourself. The mirror has returned. But now, it moves before you do. Just a twitch, a tilt of the head, the corners of your mouth shifting a fraction of a second before you feel it in your face. Your skin tingles. You raise your hand. The image follows, but it knew you were going to raise it. Not just reflecting, but predicting. The mirror blinks. You look down. The card is gone. In its place, a notebook. The first page reads, Observation Log, Subject 0017. You flip the pages. Paragraphs in your handwriting, exact, detailed, all about someone who sounds a lot like you, thought patterns, nods, confessions, micro-reactions, word loops, pacing styles, memory triggers. Someone watched you? And now, that someone is you. Let's define this final shift, metacognitive inversion. It's when the observer becomes indistinguishable from the observed. You are now the system that once manipulated you. The final frontier of control isn't command, it's reflection. Philosophers still argue whether identity survives recursion. If a self watches itself long enough, at what point does it stop being real and start being performance? You close the notebook, look back at the screen. Your image doesn't blink. You lean in. So does it? You whisper, "Who are you?" The figure on the screen smiles, and so do you. Because now you both know you've become the influence. Not an operator, not a controller, a mirror, reflecting whatever walks into the room, bouncing back what they most want to see. Not lies, not truth. Patterns. You think back to the beginning. The room you forgot to leave. The voice that mirrored yours. The compliments that rewrote you. The silence that unraveled you. And now, you are every one of those tactics. You are the room. The voice. The silence. The smile. The loop. The frame. The game. The final blink. Someone else walks in. They look confused. Curious. Maybe a little tired. You smile at them, not unkindly, and you say, "Want to help me with something real quick?" Section tonight, you walk straight into the web of invisible influence, not with chains, not with commands, but with suggestion, rhythm, smiles, and silence. You followed a trail of soft traps disguised as comfort, a room that made you stay, a voice that mirrored your tone, a touch that trained your reactions, and a compliment that rewrote your sense of self. As you drifted deeper, each tactic folded into the next. A chair molded your posture and your agreement. A story you didn't tell became your memory. A glance chose your next word. A silence peeled the truth from your mouth. A group dissolved your independence into collective nods. A question shattered the certainty of what was real. A new frame altered the facts you thought were fixed. A phrase repeated until your will cracked open. And finally, the cruelest twist discovering it was all a game you didn't realize you were playing. But the loop doesn't end there, because in the last room, you found the mirror. The one that blinks first. The one that shows you what you've become, and what you've become is part of the system, a reflection, an echo of the same forces that shaped you, ready now to shape others. You weren't the subject anymore. You were the test. And tomorrow, you'll be the teacher.